In this video, I'm going to be walking you through an in-depth DIY installation of this beautiful garden paver path. And what makes this installation a little bit different and a little special, it is installed on a paver base panel. In part 1, which I'll put a link up above, you'll want to watch because that'll take you through the excavation, the setup, and the layout and the sub base to get ready to start putting the Gator base panels down. And this part 2 video is going to pick up right as we're installing the Gator base panels and finish that, and then walk you through step by step of everything you need to do to install a beautiful garden paver path like this in your garden. Okay, let's get started.
All right, we're picking up right where we left off the night before installing the Gator base. And you can see I've set some pavers on top of the paver base panel. It is a styrofoam material, so it can curl up a little bit in the heat, working in the 90s when I was installing this. So it was pretty warm. And there's a small chance that it could blow away, but I don't think that's that big. And it's easy just to set a couple pavers in on top of it as you move and then blend them in to the pattern that you're working. And I'm doing everything in a Holland paver, so that makes it quite easy. Great shot here, kind of seeing how the whole system works. And this is where you put the 4-ounce fabric on top of the sub base, then put the sand on top of the fabric, and then you fold over the fabric. That's why we left it long. And you saw down kind of by the welcoming circle where it's not in between the big block edging there. Folding over the fabric. Yes, I like it nice and neat. Folding over the fabric and encapsulating the sand inside and just making it solid so it can't migrate and drift away. Installing the Gator base, it cuts very easy. I think a lot of times you'll see people just cut one side and snap it, but I kind of just like the ability to cut down one side, fold it, a nice trim down the other. And you can see that I'm staggering the pieces here. And that's just part of the whole concept of interlock. And since they lock together, you just kind of space them a little bit. And that whole panel base becomes kind of one big unit as it's locked together. Works out pretty nice. So we are done installing the Gator base. If you have any questions about what I did there, make sure you leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer it or direct you to a video or do something like that. Here's where material handling really shows up. You're going to see it's kind of a lot of lift and repeat, but having that paver cart makes a big difference. If you didn't have one of those and you didn't rent one of them, most likely you would have the pavers delivered on the pallet, and you would set the pallet as close as you can to the work site and carry from there. I ran a string line down the center of the whole project, and that's what I'm going to base everything off. When starting to lay pavers, you always start at the lowest elevation, so that was right by the sidewalk because it goes up from there. And then you start in the center, and if you can get 2 laying edges going like I did, kind of a pyramid shape if you want to call it that, that works out great. And I did grab a string line, and what I did is I made sure that I laid the pavers past where I'm going to be cutting. And then I took that string line with just a piece of wood and my chalk marker and just did a line all the way around to get my perfect circle. It's the easiest way. Put a nail on one end, stick it in, and you've got a nice gauge to create a nice perfect radius. Cutting, I purposely left all of the cutting in the video because it's something as you take on a paver project, you have to understand it may be one of the most time-consuming parts of the project is just cutting pavers. It will or should influence how you design your patio, how you design your pavers. I chose to go a simple running bond through most of the field. I thought about a herringbone, but literally I did not want to cut that many pavers. I was feeling a little lazy. Yeah, watching me do all this work saying I'm lazy. But you can see how cutting 2 pavers at a time on that straight line, you can get a beautiful radius. There's Larry. That's one of the neighbors stopping by to check out the pavers and the garden. Next up is we're going to extend the two sides, the border up to the block that make the edging inside the garden. So using a string line and just getting it up to there and straightening it on, and then doing that on the other side and getting it straight. Then you can still see the string line that's in the center, which I use to center all of the joints on. So there is like one continuous joint or space in between the pavers all the way up. Luckily, very luckily, it worked out. It doesn't always do that. Worked out that I only needed to cut one every other paver on the right side, but I did end up trimming the other side just as I put in the edging up in the garden. I'm not worried, wasn't worried about trying to make this thing totally perfect. It is a garden path. I'll keep telling you that. But one of the big, huge pluses of working on a Gator base like this is you can start and stop the project. And when you're doing it by yourself, I can't tell you how valuable that is versus just a traditional sand set. You would not be able to do what I did right there working with sand. So that was finished up the night before, had to do a little work in the office in the morning and back at it the next day working on the pavers. So picked up, wanted to get all of the cutting in place kind of up to the edge there. So still seeing the cutting. Bryce stopped by. It's kind of fun when you get neighbors and everybody stopping by and watching a project going on. But here you can get a good little kind of view on just the whole process, running the soldier course, that edging all the way up. And then you have to kind of pick and choose how much you can do at one time. And what I like doing is cutting, trimming out 2 rows or 4 rows, so 2 blocks, and then cutting a half a block for the other side. And that's just what I did there. Another plus of working on a paver base panel like this, and I think it's incredibly valuable, is you can set pavers and walk on it and work from the front side. If I was working on a sand, I would have to set those stacks of pavers to be laid behind me. So I would be reaching behind to grab each paver. This way I can set those pavers in front and just work and pull in. And if I would have sped this up anymore, you probably would not even see me lay the pavers. All of the other work takes so much more than actually setting the pavers in place. But you can see we're making some nice progress. It's looking good. But I thought it would be a good opportunity to slow it down and show you what it's like in real time to mark out each thing. So as I had mentioned, we're cutting one paver in half. So measuring them, they're not exactly 8 inches. They're 7 and change. So finding the center, putting a mark there, and then measuring out each individual cut, and then transferring that to the paver. And those little chalk marker things are awesome. You can use markers like a Sharpie, but that will leave a mark if you don't cut. And if you're working by yourself, then you get used to exactly how you're cutting, whether you're taking the line, leaving the line. And that makes a difference. If you're working with someone, and if I had another person there, I would probably have put them on cutting and just doing that, because they would probably cut almost as fast as I was doing the rest of it. But with those lines marked, head off to the cut station and then come back. There they are. Did take the cutting out of this one. And then you can see why if you cut too many, they don't, you gotta remember which one was for where, and usually, yeah, something like that. But if you're cutting them just perfect and you know where you are on the line, you can see that there's absolutely no slop in there. They just drop in nice and perfect. And then this is where you can see having the pavers in front of you. And I should mention just being able to tighten everything up. That is another huge plus of working on a paver base. You can just kind of tap those things and get your joints nice and close. And then having the stacks of pavers in front of you just allows for really smooth installation. I'll probably never get past the click and drop, and that's kind of just putting it into the corner, clicking it into the existing paver and sliding it down. I know Alliance says you can just set them on the Gator base and slide them into place, but I do like that. Just drop and get that tight feel right in there. And we're almost done laying the pavers on this phase of this project. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be adding a timber frame structure to the carriage house there, and then extending the paver patio. And this is one of the challenges when you're working with a paver base, when you're going to be adding on or doing additions. Where do you start? Where do you stop the paver base? And what I chose to do is add a little bit more fabric and wetting that sand down. Watch video part number 1 so you have a good understanding why I wet the sand down. But what I did is just bring it up to here, fold it over, and just kind of got a close edge. I know that when I add on, I probably will be taking up 2 feet of pavers, 2 feet back of the sidewalk to get a smooth transition in, and that's just part of it. Okay, we are almost done with this project. It is the next morning, and yes, you can see why I call it a welcoming circle. That was Rory and Archie out for their morning walk, and neighbors stop by, and you just have a little space to hang out. That's the design side. All right, putting in the edging, the edge restraint, which kind of holds all the interlock in place. And this is really slick. Another big plus of working with a paver base and actually the Alliance. There's Henry. Say hi to Henry. He's watching. He's watched the whole project.
Help.
All right, the paver base and Jack.
You're not going to help.
He's not going to help. He just likes watching. All right. But the paver base, you don't have to use large 10 or 12 inch spikes and pound those into the ground so they don't hit pipes below or anything else below. Just use the small little expanding screw, and that goes right into the paver base and holds it in place, and you're not fighting sand in the edge. This is a pretty slick part, and I think it is one of the big pluses. Still have to figure out if you're ever going to do any additions and keep the irrigation contractors away from trying to dig it up or lifting it up. Might be some issues there, but that's all separate. But really, really slick to do the edge restraint this way. And then another thing is be very careful when you're screwing those in, because it's really easy to just hit it really hard with the impact wrench or the driver that you're using and strip those out. So you want to go nice and slow and just bring them up so they just get tight and they hold in. Every other hole is sufficient, but I always do a couple extra at the end. And now it's time for the polymeric sand. Actually, I got to put in a couple little pieces of edging at the end and on the side there. Now it's time for the polymeric sand. So we're going to do one quick clean off a brush of everything, and then we're just going to drop the sand in. Now, happen to be using an Alliance product here. This is the G2 sand, which is a good sand. We don't need to get into polymeric, but something to understand when you are putting polymers down. It's mixed to a specific ratio inside the bag, so you don't want to put it in one big pile and push it all over. You kind of want to fill in joints as you go by and just spread it all out. I will be using 2 different brooms to do this. You can see the one that's there is green on the head. It has a really stiff bristle, and I'm just going to kind of almost like bulldoze it and let it fall into the joints and just back and forth. I'm not really trying to sweep that much. I'm trying to keep the gradation, the mixture of sand and polymers together. But you do cover the whole thing, let it go in, and here is the next most important thing to do when you're doing poly sand is to pack it. And yes, just using a hand tamper on this will be enough. That will settle it down 20 to 30% and fill in the joints. Roller packers are nice. The vibratory plates, sometimes you have problems with those jumping on the pavers a little bit. And then the second broom, you'll see that this is a blue. This is a soft bristle, and what I'm doing is I'm refilling everything up and then just setting it right to the chamfer, right to the on that chamfer of the paver and getting there. And then it's soaking it down. We are almost done with this project. Holy cow, flying through it. And last but not least, we are going to put a little bit of soil up on top of the Gator base, the Paver base, and bring it up to grade. And with that, this project is done. Then I can get back to gardening and working on the pergola that's going to go on those footings right there. Pretty spectacular. I know we covered a whole heck of a lot in this part 2 video. Make sure you check out part 1. That's going to get you the excavation all the way up to putting in the Gator base. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to watch this. There's a lot of videos on the channel just about doing gardening and doing other landscaping, hardscaping projects. And if you would follow along, subscribe to the channel, it'd be greatly appreciated. And don't be afraid to take on a DIY project and put a little garden paver path in your garden. Thanks so much. Enjoy.